In this lesson, we'll learn how to place graphics into our layout. Alright, so in the previous lesson we learned how to save our layout here as a template, so we can use this series of settings as a basis to build future trifold brochures from. So it's time to go ahead and start bringing in content into our brochure here, and we're going to go ahead and start with images. So there's a couple of different ways we can bring images into our InDesign layout, and since we're working on the outside of our brochure, we'll focus on one of those ways. When we switch over to the inside of our brochure, we'll go ahead and switch over and take a look at the other method. So if you remember, in the previous lesson, we drew in our very first frame here, and you can see that it's represented by this X and this box right here. I've got that selected right now. So what we need to do to go ahead and bring in images, let's come up over here to the File drop-down menu, and I'm going for this place command right here. Now, the place command is a highly used command. You're going to use this a lot. So notice there's a keyboard shortcut of Control-D assigned to that. I would commit that to memory. It's very, very helpful to memorize that keyboard shortcut. So let's go ahead and open up this place dialog, and remember we have this frame selected. So I've got 5 images here. Notice they're all native Photoshop formats, and you can actually find these in the project files for this course, and you can follow along with me if you'd like. So we also have some options down here, and we're going to talk about those more here in just a moment. Right now I'm going to go for this cover bathroom image right here. Now I'm going to select that. Notice we get a preview of that image down here. It's an image of a bathroom. So notice we also by default have this replace selected item selected here. So if there was an image currently in this frame, by placing this cover bathroom image into this frame, we're going to actually replace that image. So let's go ahead and click open right now. And InDesign is going to go ahead and drop that image into our frame. So notice here that we're not seeing the entire image. What we're seeing here is just a portion of it. So essentially this frame is cropping our image to this upper left-hand portion of the image. Now, you may also notice that there's this sort of this gray donut looking shape right on the center of our image. This is actually a new feature in InDesign CS5. It's called the Content Grabber. Now, in versions of InDesign prior to CS5, in order to work with the content of this frame, we would have to switch over to our direct selection arrow here and click on the frame to select the image inside the frame. Now in InDesign CS5, all we need to do to modify the image in the frame is go ahead and click on the Content Grabber. Notice when I mouse over that here, we get a little hand icon. So it's responding just like we were hitting the space bar on our keyboard to move around our composition here. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag here, and you can see we're getting a very light preview of the image here, and we can move this around as long as we're working with that Content Grabber. So let me go ahead and grab that again here. Moving that around here, we can reposition that and crop in on another area of our image. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here, and notice that there's an orange outline of the image here. Now, this is the actual image that's selected. So at this point, we could come in here and click on one of these corners, and we could go ahead and modify the image inside the frame. So you can see here that right now I'm not constraining the transformation I'm making, so we're not transforming it uniformly here. So, but if I hold down the Shift key, it's going to constrain that image. It's not going to distort it, but we can increase and decrease the size of the image here. So I think that I'm going to go ahead and reposition this image so that we crop in on a nice portion of it for the cover of this brochure here. So I'm going to just kind of come in here, and I tell you what, maybe we could even shrink that down just a little bit more. Holding down the Shift key, and I'm going to try and get this little cabinet over our title here. We're going to work with that title here in just a moment. In fact, maybe we could go ahead and just drag that up just a little bit more. Now, I'm going to be real careful not to drag this image away from the boundaries of this box. So if I zoom in here and take a look at the bottom of our frame. If I were to drag that up, we can actually have a portion of the frame that's not filled with the image. So we need to be real careful. I'm going to try and line this right up there with that red line, which is our bleed line we specified. Remember, the bleed line is the area where the image is actually going to get cropped off when the brochure is trimmed. So I think that I'm liking the positioning of this. I might move it just a little bit more here. Get a little bit more of this mirror in the composition. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and deselect this by clicking away from the image. And we'll zoom back out a little bit. Now, I'll tell you what, let me go ahead and come in and place our second image. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-D to bring up that place dialog. And I want to go for this blue lamp image right here. Now you can see here that we've just got a lamp here. The background's actually cropped out. That's because there's actually a mask inside this bluelamp.psd that is going to be read by InDesign. So that's going to carry over from Photoshop into InDesign. We've masked out that background. Now at this point I want to come in and I'm actually going to go ahead and check this Show Import Options. Now let's go ahead and hit Open on this. And notice we didn't have a text frame, or excuse me, a frame selected at all. So we're actually going to place this one a little bit differently, but check out this dialog that opens up. This is an interactive dialog for this PSD file, and it's going to let us customize exactly which layers are hidden and which ones are visible. We also have some color options here and a few other options on this image tab. So this is some advanced options that you can work with if you've got a multi-layered Photoshop file and maybe you just want a few of the layers to show up on your InDesign document. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK now, and notice that we have something a little different. Now my cursor has changed and it's been loaded with this image. Our cursor also has a little paintbrush icon by that. So there's a couple different things we can do with this. We can either just click anywhere in our document and InDesign is going to drop that image in. Let me go ahead and undo that here. We'll go back to the loaded cursor screen. We can also come in here and we can draw in a box using our loaded cursor, and InDesign will drop that image in exactly the size of the box that we drew. I tell you what, let me go ahead and undo that one more time. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on my document here, drop that in full size. Now, I'd like to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about planning out this composition. Now, keeping in mind that this is the back side of our brochure, it's also important to remember that your customers or your intended target audience is going to view this brochure in different states. So they could unfold it and view the entire back at once. If they were to open the front cover of this folded brochure, then flip it over, they could look at these two panels right here at one time. Now, also if they open the front cover and look behind it, not only are they going to see the back side of this front cover panel, but they're also going to see this panel right here. So it might be kind of nice to think about maybe creating a little bit of a relationship between these panels, maybe even overlapping some of them. So I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and work to do that right now. Let's go ahead and take this blue lamp image, and I'm going to go ahead and snap that into our grid here. And let's go ahead and reduce the size of this a little bit. Now, I'm going to hold down Shift and drag the corner of this frame. Now notice that we're cropping the image. We're not actually resizing that. So let me go ahead and undo that here. There's a couple ways we could actually go about resizing this image. Now in previous versions of InDesign, we would have had to hold down Control and Shift to actually resize the content inside the frame as well as the frame. Let me go ahead and undo that and show you one other thing that's been added in InDesign CS5. We can actually come up here to Object, choose Fitting, and I want to come over here to Frame Fitting Options. Alright, now InDesign CS5 has added this Auto Fit option right here. So if we go ahead and enable this by clicking on this checkbox right here, we can also set a few other options here. So we can specify exactly how much to crop. We can specify how the content fits within the frame, and we can also change the reference point here. Notice by default it's in the top left corner. I'm just going to go ahead and turn on Auto Fit right now, and now I can come over here and I can hold down Shift if I want to do it proportionally, and you can see that the content is automatically fitting within this frame box. So if I were to just not hold down Shift and move that around, you can see again that it's based on the settings for auto fit, how we set that auto fit up. So I want to go ahead and hold down Shift and scale that down just a little bit here. And let's go ahead and crop in on this some. I'm going to drag this to where basically we can fit this image here inside this column right about here. So I'm going to just drag this in and crop this some. Let's zoom out and we'll crop that to the bleed line here. Now notice we cropped it and the image moved over here to the right of our frame. So we can just drag that back in simply by doing that there. Well, let's move that up just a little bit. I want to try and crop that to where half of this lamp is going to show up in this frame, and the other half is actually going to appear when we do this inside spread of our brochure. So we'll actually see half of it here and half of it on the back side of this cover frame. So let me just zoom in on this. And I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and work more with the size of this lamp once we have the other half of the lamp placed onto the insides of the brochure here. So I'm going to come in here and bring up my place dialog one more time here, and we have 3 other images slated to go on the outside of this brochure. And this is another option that we're able to do with placing images in Design CS5. We can actually select multiple images here. So let's come in and select several of these images that we haven't placed yet. Let's go ahead and select the blue vase. The ball vase, the home office, and the orange liquid vase. So I'm going to select all 3 of those by holding down the Control key and clicking them here. And let's go ahead and hit Open here. Now notice because we had the Show Import Options dialog checked, we still get this Import Options here. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK on this for each one of my 3 images that we've selected here. And notice that we get our loaded cursor again. Now, here it's a little different. We have a little blue 3 in parentheses to the right of our cursor. That means we have 3 different images loaded into our cursor. Now, at this point, we can come over to our keyboard and use our arrow keys, moving right and left to cycle through these 3 images. So we can choose any of these 3 images to place first. Now, we can also place these images one at a time, just like we did with the blue lamp, either by clicking on our document or by drawing in a frame with our loaded cursor, or we can actually draw in a frame. Let's go ahead and start drawing a frame here. And let's go ahead and see what our arrow keys do now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my right arrow key here, and notice that I now have 2 columns. We can actually set up a grid for our images as we're drawing a frame just by hitting our arrow keys. We can hit the right and left arrow keys to add and remove columns, and we can hit the up and down arrow keys to add and remove rows from our grid. So a lot of options as far as placing multiple images here in InDesign. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this back and place in 2 of my 3 images here, and you can see that they've each been placed into one of the columns of the grid I drew. So let's just go ahead and undo that here. I'm going to use the modular grid that we've already planned out for on our document here, and I'm just going to go ahead and draw in 3 frames here. I'm going to go ahead and take into consideration balance and the flow of this spread, and let's go ahead and bring in a frame right about here, and I'm going to draw this frame over. Let's go ahead and stretch it down to right about there. And let's go ahead and draw in one here. Actually, let's undo that. Let's go ahead and stick this image right over here and put it in just one of our modules. And then I'll go ahead and draw in one. Let's put it right about here. Now, obviously, you're going to need to balance the images with the text for a project you're working on. Let's go ahead and come in here. I'm going to go ahead and resize this image some. Let's go ahead and drag this frame out to where it comes all the way over here and fills this area right here. So we'll just fit that frame just like so. Now I'm going to click on my content grabber here, and I'm going to just hold down my shift key and stretch this image out. And we're going to work to crop in on this image just a little bit and get to more of a pleasing composition here. So I'm going to come up, and I want a little bit more of that share to appear in the frame. So I'm just going to drag that up sort of like that. And let me go ahead and switch into preview mode by hitting W on my keyboard. And that looks pretty good. So I tell you what, in between lessons, I'll go ahead and crop in on these images and get them looking exactly the way I want them to be. And in the next lesson, we'll go ahead and take a look at one other way that we can bring in our content in the form of images onto the inside of our brochure.